to the cloud. And cool. All right, so now we're recording. So just know that if you talk, it'll be in the recording. It records everything.
Okay.
Cool. All right, so I'm on Code Sandbox.io. I use this as a way to play around with React. And so let's create a new React sandbox. And I think what I'd like to do is use the JSON placeholder API as a way to get some fake data into our app. So there's a lot of different options that we have here. And I think for the most part, what I'm going to do is use the to-dos API, which returns this JSON. And so I'm going to just grab that URL and we'll get started. So I'm going to delete all of this and put in a class for my app component so that I can define some state. And so I'm going to say that to-dos is just an empty array as of right now. Okay, unexpected token, let's see. Oh, yes, because I'm in an object. All right. And so as of right now, maybe what I would do is put like a h1 to-do app, and then we would map over the to-dos. So if I started, if we take a look, what we'll do is we'll grab this first one to have an example of what a to-do looks like, okay? And we'll say in this paragraph, number of to-dos is this .state .todos .length. Okay. And so right now we have one. And then we'll have a UL. And it will do this .state .todos .map. For each to-do, I'm going to return an li with that to-do .title. Okay. Close off the map, close off the UL. Okay, and now I can see that to-do. We're going to have a class on here if it's been completed. Okay, so we'll say class name is going to be completed dash, and then I will say to-do .completed. So basically, it'll have a class of either completed true or completed false. And then can import styles /styles.css. Okay, and so in this CSS, I can say that if it's completed true, then it's going to have a text decoration of strike through, line through, there we go. So if it's completed, it'll have a line through. So let me grab a couple more of these. Again, this is just our baseline to kind of just have some sample ones. So there we go. So we've got 4 in there now, and we can see that one is clearly completed. I'm going to say that if the li itself will always have a cursor pointer to invoke some sort of click action. And then on the li, I want to basically toggle in state that's specific to do. Each of them has an ID, and I want to toggle back and forth on whether it's completed or not. So we will make a method in here called toggle complete. It will take in a ID. Okay. And then what we will do is we will say, we're going to do a this.set state. We will set the state of the to-dos to this.state.todos.map. And for each to-do, we're just going to make a decision on whether or not we're going to return that entire to-do, or if we're going to make a modification. So if the ID is equal to to-do.id, then we want to say to-do.completed equals the opposite of to-do.completed. Okay, and then we will return that modified to-do, or it's not modified, it's the to-do that was already in there. Does that make sense? Good so far? So let's go ahead and put that click event on. So on click, there's no prevent default here or anything, but we do want to make sure that we go into a callback function. Otherwise, the on click event will fire automatically. So we want to invoke it and save it for later. So once someone does click, we want to call on this.toggle complete, and we want to pass in todo.id. Okay, and that's it for our click event. And now we should be able to toggle completed and not completed. Right? Pretty straightforward. I might do completed also has a color of like a light gray. Something to just make it stand out a little bit. Cool. Awesome. All right. So the last thing that we need to do is generate a new to-do. These IDs kind of go in mathematical order or in numerical order. So we should be able to just say the ID is the length, right? +1. So like there's 4 in here, right? So the next one would be the current length plus 1 more. We can set the user ID to 1, that's fine. And we'll let the user put a title in basically. So I'm gonna just make that up above the list and just an area where they can add in a new to-do. Okay, and so this will just be an input type equals text. And I'm gonna have this sitting in state, new to-do, as just a string. That way I don't have to do reference or go back to the DOM. I can just set it based on state. So its value will be this.state.new to-do. Do that. It'll have an ARIA label of new to-do. It'll have a placeholder of new to-do. And then we need the on change, which would actually put it into the list. So we'll do create to-do. And all we really need to know about that to-do is the title itself. Okay. And so new const new to-do equals user ID will be 1. The ID itself will be this.state.todos.length plus 1. The title will be the title that came in. And the completed will default to false since it's a new one. Okay. Then this.setState to-dos is an array that's a copy of this.state.todos plus this new to-do. Okay. Very easy way to just basically, essentially, do the same thing as a dot push onto that array. Okay. All right. So for that form to fire, what we'll do is we'll put in input type equals submit, value equals add, and ARIA label add to do. Okay, perfect. So we need to trigger that submit event to run the create to do. And right now we're passing in title. That was a misnomer. Title should come from this.state.new to do. Okay, and oops, I want to set that to the title key. And then obviously because of that, we want to not just set to-dos, but set new to-do back to an empty string when we add it in. Okay, so in the form, you can very easily do the on submit. In this case, we do have an event, so we can pass the event into create to do and use the event to prevent default. Okay. And so we'll call this dot create to do and pass that event in. Okay. Now, as of right now, if we did this, it would just add a bunch of empty to-dos because the new to-do string is blank, and I can't change this. I can't type into this because the value comes from state, but I haven't specified an on change. I also really don't want empty strings in there, right? So the easiest thing to do is just if this dot state dot to do, or sorry, dot new to do is not a blank string, right? Since that's the default, then we won't run any of this code if that's empty. So I can hit add all day long, but until I type something, it's not going to add it. So let's handle that change. So in this, we just basically, and we can do this inline. We have an event and we want to do a this.setState. We want to set new to do to e.target. So that's the input itself that triggered this change dot value. Okay. And so as I'm typing, it's updating in state. So then I can add, and it clears it out so that I can add more, right? Record context video. Perfect. And I can hit enter as well because I tied that form to the submit event. Now, this is all well and good. We have basically a to-do app, right? I can add to-dos, I can mark them off. I can't delete them, but I'm not too stressed about that because I actually want to pull this in from an outside API. And I can add more to those to-dos. So I'm going to take this URL, and we've got our custom methods in here. I want to add another method, a built-in one, component did mount. And I'm going to run a fetch call on this URL, dot then response.json, dot then to-dos, this dot set state to-dos. Okay, so there's my to-dos coming in, and you can see when the component mounts, I have 200 to-dos, right? They all came from the outside source, and I can, the ones that were already marked complete are complete, but I can add record context video. It adds it to the bottom, okay? So maybe what I want to do is actually show new to-dos first, right? Instead of putting them in this order. So when I map over the to-dos, what I can do first is sort them. So I could do a sort and pass in a comma b, an inline function, and basically say a.id minus b.id. I think that might be correct. I might have to play with that a little bit. So if I say test and hit enter, no, it's still going to the bottom. So let's try this. Let's try b.id minus a.id. There we go. So now it's in reverse order. So A basically represents, let's say, the first item, and B is the second item. And I'm basically saying to reverse them, where b.id should be greater than a.id. And so that will put it up towards the top, which means if I say record context video and hit add, it goes right to the top. So my latest to-dos are at the top. The oldest ones that I still haven't gotten done are down at the bottom. You know, makes it pretty easy. These are like my priorities. And then when I'm done today's priorities, I can like go back and work on ones from the past, right? I'm not really worried about deleting right now, but we have at this point a fully functioning React app. And the problem with this React app, and let me make this a little bigger so we can see a little more code, and I'll even increase the size. The problem with this React app and the way that it is, and by the way, let's go ahead and clear out these to-dos since our app grabs those to-dos when the component mounts. We don't need to start with any dummy ones. That was just to help build it. So the only issue that we have right now with this is that everything is in one file. So if we wanted to break this down into multiple components, we totally could do that. But we know we're going to have to start doing prop drilling and things like that. So what I would rather do is move this more towards context. And in order to do that, what I would like to do is to actually move all these methods into state. That's going to seem weird at first. But for now, let's do it multi-step. We'll approach this in multiple steps. Let's start by creating context. So there is a couple of different ways that we could handle context. We could create a folder called context, and we could store multiple contexts in that folder. I'm of the mindset that that doesn't need to happen. Now, in the root directory, we can create one file And I do tend to name it something other than just context.js. Like what are we doing here? This is our to-do context. We could end up creating multiple files. We could, but we don't have to. So I'm going to go ahead and make it simple. Just call it context. I'm thinking like in the future, myself or other developers who came into this project, which let's be honest, will be me down the line, not knowing what the heck I was thinking. That if we see context.js, we know immediately what that is, right? And so in order to get this set up, I'm going to import React from React. And then line 2, export default React.create context, the end. That's it. Now there's many examples out there of context having a lot more going on than just this. And we'll go into why you might want to do that. Some of the examples are like actually creating a component in here that is the provider for the context and then exporting all of that. And there's really no reason to do that. Like in the order that we've built this, we basically want everything the app does for context to do. Every time that we say this.state or this.setState, we actually want to say this.context, right? And in some smaller, more organized component structure. So because of that, I basically want context to be a blank slate. It's literally just a file that has to exist to contain or represent that context that other components are going to import. So as of right now, it's empty. And there are reasons that we could add to this, and we'll take a look at that if we have enough time for testing. So now that I have that done, what I want to do is go ahead and import that context file. Import context from /context. And the only thing I'm going to do with this is to actually come down here in my render method, and right above the app, I'm going to put in that context dot provider, which requires a value attribute. And we need to close off our context provider. Now, again, in a lot of examples that I see, we create like this value variable and then we put that in value. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say the value is this.state. Everything in state goes into context. Okay. So that means I should be able to start moving these things. Okay. So let me think of how I want to structure this. So I'm going to have a components folder. Inside of that components folder, I'm going to have a header. Inside of header, I will have a header.js. Inside of components folder, I will also have a add to do. Okay. Inside of there, I will have an add to do.js. Inside of components, I will also have a to do list. Okay. Inside of do list, I will have to do list.js. And then finally, finally, let's go one more and we'll do a to do, just each individual to do. Seems a little overkill, but we'll get through this. Okay, so for each of these, I'm going to start moving the code into each of these. Let me start by creating classes in each of these. So to do. So this is my to do component. This is my add to do component. Okay. My header. I'm just hitting Command D here on the Mac to select a word, not just once, but every instance. So I double click and then Command D, to do list. This allows me to type it multiple times. And so now in app, I'm going to need to import all four of those. So I will go ahead and import header from ./components/header/header. Okay. I will import add to do from ./components/add/add. Okay. Okay. Let's change all three of these to do. And let's change all three of these to do list. Okay. Now React is mad. I'm not using any of those, so let's start to move them. So header is basically this h1 and the number of to-dos. So I'm going to take that out, put in header here. Okay. Save that, go to header, change its div to this. Save and save. Okay. Now right off the bat, header is throwing a fit. It's saying, what? This.state.todos.length. Okay, you're right. You're not going to get state. Now, of course, this is where you would normally say, oh, let me just pass state. Let me spread state down to header, and it has it. Nope, not anymore. Because now we're just going to import context from /context. And in fact, we should do this across all of them. Okay. Add to-do, and to-do list. Okay. The other thing we'll need to do across all of them is to establish context as a class-based property. We do that using the static keyword, and we say context type equals context. Okay. What this does is this allows us to say this.context within the render method or within the entire class component. Okay, so now each one of these is importing context, it's establishing context. Can I find module context? Ah, okay. So I got the pathing wrong, right? Should have let the autocomplete handle this. // which gets us up to the components level, // which gets us to the root level, then context. Okay, might as well fix this for all of them. Let's just pretend this was intended. And I did this to, I don't know, prove a point. Okay, so now getting back into header. I don't have to say this.state.todos anymore, because remember, this.state is the value that we gave to our context. So I can just say this.context. Okay, and now header works like it did before. It says the number of to-dos is 200. I didn't pass that down as a prop. I didn't make a value object that I gave to value here. I just said whatever's in state goes in context. So when context reference to-dos, and I add another one, context re-renders. Just like this is still being re-rendered from state. This is coming from context, which is coming from state. And this down here, these are all coming from state. So let's work on that. Let's take the form out of here, put it into add to do. Okay. Save that, go over to add to do. And we don't need a parent element because the form itself will be the parent element. Okay. And this says that the value is this.state.new to do. Well, we already know this.context.new to do. Okay. And now it's working, right? Except when I try to change, okay, I'm saying this.setState, so that doesn't work. And when I try to add, it's technically throwing an error here because the prevent default's not happening, but it doesn't know what this.createToDo is. So we're at our first impasse here on methods, okay? And so what I want to do is I want to come up in an app and I want to move createToDo and toggle complete, and we're going to have another method for our add to do on updating or changing new to do. Okay, so we basically want this function, but we're going to have to replace it with something else. Okay, we'll still have the event, but it'll be something this.context dot. Let's call it new to do, and then we'll pass in e like so. Okay, so to do that, we'll go into app and we'll create that. And remember, I said that I want context to be derived from state. So guess what? State is a JavaScript object, meaning it can hold strings and arrays and objects and booleans and numbers. That means it can also hold, oh, we should change this, set new to do. Okay. It means we can also put in methods or functions as a data type. Okay, so I can put in that one-liner that I pasted or copied. So set new to do is now something that exists inside of context. So if I hit add or sorry, if I start typing, you can see it lets me type again. And context is being updated. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to open this in a new window so we can bring up DevTools. I'm doing this on a large screen, so let me zoom in DevTools and let me zoom in the page. Okay. So if I go into components and I look at app, right, there's app state, right? So if I start typing things in new to do, I can see app state is updating, right? There's my set new to do function, and there's my array of 200 to dos. But look at context provider. It has a value, new to do, set new to do, and to dos. It matches, right? But again, also when I'm typing in here, it's updating in context as well, which is allowing that cyclical re-rendering of the input. When I change, it updates context, but it also reads its value from context. Okay, so this is what I talk about when I say context the easy way. Put everything in state, set context to the state, and you're done. When you need to add things, when you need to change things, when you need to remove things from context, you just go to app state and it's done. Okay, this is also why I like building the app first in app as much as you can. Some apps are a little too complex for that. But I like building the entire app in app first in app.js so that then you can break it down. Okay, so speaking of, let's do that with the rest of these, right? So toggle complete. Let's see if we can make this a little more streamlined. So toggle complete takes in an ID, and yeah, then just basically we should be able to do a ternary on this. So this dot set state. We could do this as a one-liner function, honestly. This dot set state of to dos to this dot state dot to dos dot map over each to do, and then we're just asking a question. If the ID triple equals to do dot ID, then we're going to return to do. Oh no, we can't do that. So we have to return the whole to do. All right, never mind. I tried to be fancy. Let's just do this. We're going to take this entire. There we go, and we will just move that up here. Cool. And we're done with toggle complete. And we can do the same thing with create to do. We will just take that entire method as it exists. We will add it in as another option to state. We just have to change this equals to a semicolon and get rid to a colon and get rid of the semicolon. Okay. And so now our three methods, and I'll just collapse them. Create to do, toggle complete, and set new to do are all inside of state, which means they're also all inside of context. If we go back over here and take a look at the context provider, you will see that it has create to do, the value of new to do, which is our form input, the set new to do method, the to dos themselves, and the toggle complete. Okay, and all of these now do not work because it says this dot toggle complete, right? Because it's no longer a method, we moved it in the state. So let's continue to work on this. Let's actually do this. We want to, our next step is to actually get this to do to be added, okay? And so if we go back to our add to do, it was saying when we submit, we need to go to this.create to do. But remember, that is now in context. So it'll actually be this.context.create to do, okay? So I can type something in, I can hit add, and it's added. It's added to the app state and also to context. Okay, so our methods and our data are inside context now. Okay, so this is where you'll see in the documentation for context, it shows all these examples of like consuming and providing, and there's really no reason that's where context can get really, really complicated. Because yes, you can have multiple providers, but the source of truth on what provider is the true data gets really wacky. So let's say, for instance, that I put a provider in to-do list, and to-do list renders to-do. Well, to-do is going to base all of its data on whatever was provided by to-do list. It's going to ignore everything above to-do list, right? Even though app was the original provider, it's like, well, now this one's the provider, and I'm the child of that, so that's what I base my information on. Okay, The solution I'm showing you right here with this is that you don't have to do that. You don't have to worry about all that confusion. You will just literally, app is your only provider, and then every other component just consumes that data, as much or as little of it as we need. Like in add to do, it's referencing 3 things from context: the create to do method, the set new to do method, and the value of new to do. Okay. Whereas in header, we just need to know how many are there, right? So we're literally just pulling in little pieces as we need them, and there's no prop drilling. So let's continue that and start to move the rest of this. Okay, we're going to move this into to-do list. And we're going to go over into to-do list, and it's going to be all this fun list. Remember now, instead of this.state.todos, it's this.context. Okay. Instead of this.toggle complete, it's this.context.toggle complete. Okay. And now we have a fully functioning context-driven application where we can add in new to-dos, we can toggle them complete and incomplete, right? And we are good to go, right? Pretty straightforward. Of course, since we're in a map here with this LI, we could move that in. So we're gonna have to adjust our app. So we're gonna import to-do from, go up a level, down to to-do / to-do. Okay, and we're gonna put that here. So that to-do gets a prop of to-do. This is the only place that we're going to use a prop, right? And then to-do will literally just render in from props. So let's actually create that variable up here. Const to-do equals this.props. So now it will have access to all of that. Let's refresh this. Looks like hopefully I didn't lock up Code Sandbox. By taking my to-do list, putting a to-do for each one, passing it a prop called to-do, that is the value of this to-do from the map. And this one will take in that to-do. Looks good. It is not letting me save. I think Code Sandbox may be a little tired, so I'm going to give it just a couple more seconds. And let's just go ahead and do a refresh of Code Sandbox. Hopefully we don't lose everything. If we do, I think we got the gist of what was going on here. And hopefully this was constantly saving for us so that we don't have to worry about that. Hopefully it's not a case of my internet being completely out. Let's see. React context. Okay, good. So it's just Code Sandbox then. Hopefully we weren't writing overly complex context code. So it does say it's unresponsive. And the page does appear to be reloading now. Worst case scenario, what we can do here is grab the URL, close that tab, open a new one with that URL. And hopefully we have at least a more recent save state here. It looks like we have everything in here. Okay, we've got to do down here. We can also take to do out of here, since we no longer need to import to do into app. All of that is happening inside of todo.js. todo.js is throwing an error. I think this may have just been the auto re-rendering. I might have typed something out of place and it got kind of like caught in an infinite loop. You could see that here with the problems console. It's going a bit crazy. To do is not defined. Yeah, and it's just going, it's re-rendering constantly. All right, let's do this. Let's go into to-do list, and we're not going to be able to undo it because it's going to constantly try to keep re-rendering. And that's pretty much locked everything up. I can't even look. Okay. So what I'm going to try to do here, we'll try to close this out and just wait a little bit for that to calm down, and try to get in here without it starting a render. So I'll go to components, to-do list, and yeah, it's like constantly conking out. Dang, I don't want to. Let's do this. We'll just go ahead and delete to do entirely. And that should stop the problems from re-rendering. And then we'll do another little refresh of this page. Yeah, something went into like an infinite loop there. It could just be the fact again that we're making that fetch call. We're getting in 200 to-dos. That might have been a little jumping the gun on that. Okay, perfect. So now we just have the issue that it's like, I don't know what to do is. And in fact, it probably honestly was a little kind of a misnomer there to go a step further. We really didn't need to. Oh man, now we lost to-do list too. Let's see if we can undo that. Nope, not going to be able to. Okay. So we'll have to rebuild to-do list. We should be able to undo enough in here to get that back, maybe. No, okay, that's fine. It's not a big deal to redo that work, and let's go ahead and add in to-do list. Title's already been taken. Okay. Let's do another hard refresh on this. I don't know how I got this all screwy. Okay, under components, we do have a to-do list already. The to-do list is there. It's mad about to-do being gone. We're not going to have undo history in here to bring to-do back. That's okay. We can just remap that ourselves. Is there a chance that it's still on my clipboard? No. Okay, that's all right. So I believe it's just an li and on click that didn't really do much of anything, but called this.context.toggle to do and passed in the to-do.id. Had a class name of complete dash to-do.completed or to-do.complete. Let's see what that was. Yeah, completed. And then we would close off the li, and it would be to-do.title, and that should be about right. Unexpected token, I missed something here. Okay, map over to do. It's going to return this li on click. Let's see what we missed here. Expected a closing curly brace. So let's see, we've got an on click, this.context. Oh yes, there we go. Okay, and so I probably have an extra one somewhere. Expected comma. Class name is a mixture of to-do completed. Yep, and then to-do.title. And don't need that there. Perfect, okay. That was the extra one. So all said and done, now we're back to this. Okay, and that's fine. This.context.toggle to do. Let's go up to app. I think it was called toggle complete. We'll go back to do. So that was fun. That was a fun example on what not to do, right? Come on now. Okay. All right, let's take a look at what toggle complete expects an ID. So back into to-do list, on click to-do.id. I did get that property correct. Class name is to-do.completed. Oh, it may be My style is probably wrong. Completed, not complete. Completed. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Ay. That was fun. All right. So the point is we took our working app, we organized it into components, but there was not one single prop that was passed. We put everything in state, including the methods that directly modify state, and we passed those down, the entire state, into our context provider. We have this nice clean app component. In the render, we have our component dim mount, of course, to get the data. And then the biggest part of our app, and the clunkiest part really, is just the state, okay? And again, we can collapse that, and then this is a pretty lean app, and then each component handles its own thing and pulls in what it needs. I need the list of components, and as well as the toggle complete method. I just need the number of components, and in add to do, I need 2 methods and the value of the to-do form. And that is context, what I would call the easy way. Now, I mentioned you may want to have some default information in context. Let's take a look at why that might be, why we might want to add more to this file. And that revolves around writing tests. So Code Sandbox does have testing built in, just like you would do smoke tests normally through like your NPM package with React scripts test here with enzyme and jest and whatnot. And so we can do that. It will automatically pick up anything that is a .test.js. So let's start with app actually. So we'll go ahead and create a new file in source called app.test.js. Now I have a React smoke test snippet that I use all the time. And so I'll go ahead and default to app. And so this is going to import app and just do a simple, can it render without crashing? And of course, app can render on its own because it does everything, right? It is the source of truth. Now we'll go ahead and copy this. And let's start with header. That seems like the most straightforward one. Header.test.js. Go ahead and paste this all in. We don't want app. In this case, we want header. So we go ahead and save that. And then header is saying, can it read property to-dos of undefined? So let's see what it's talking about. In header, to-dos of undefined. So that would be context. So the problem here is that it doesn't know how to pull in context, right? It's a little confused on how we would do that with the test. There are some times with context where you could set up a default and you could say to-dos by default is an empty array. Right? And that is allowing our test to pass. So that is one way that we could fix that, right? We can put some defaults in here. So we could do the same thing with, we'll copy and paste header, and we'll go over to the add to do. So add to do.test.js, paste this in, set all these to add to do. Okay, and now that's working as well. Even though there are methods in add to do, like create to do and set new to do. Those aren't being triggered because we aren't emulating those. Of course, you could go beyond a simple smoke test and actually use Jess's mock functions to like mock triggering those events, right? But so far, this works fine. I am a little surprised just because of we don't have new to do. In here, we only have to dos. Now, there's a reason for that. So in add to do, it says the value of this input is this.context.new to do. Well, the value of that would be undefined, right? There's not a problem there, right? Undefined as the value of the input, sure, that's fine. It's almost the same as an empty string, not a big deal. But in our header.test or our header.js, we are specifically referencing the length. Well, undefined does not have a length property. String has a length property, and arrays have a length property, and that's it. So if it's any other data type, including undefined, which is a JavaScript data type, then .length is going to throw an error. Okay, and so that's where we're at with that, and that's why we need that as a default value inside of our context and not new to do. Okay. Now another thing that you might want to do. Let's say that you wanted to keep this file clean though. And well, let's do one more thing. We want to do a to-do list.test.js. And we'll go ahead and paste all that in and change this to to-do list. Okay? And that renders successfully as well, because all that's doing is mapping over this.context.todo. So again, if we don't have that in context, right? If we set to-dos to any other, so if we set it to a string, for instance, right? Well, that gets rid of the .length issue that we had on header, right? Because string has a length, but to-do list is like, whoa, 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 I can't call sort on a string. I definitely can't call map, right? So setting that back to an empty array makes our test pass, okay? Now, of course, there's things that you could do like default props, but we're not using props, right? Prop types, but we're not using props, okay? Now, one thing you could do if you truly, truly wanted, and I don't think this is the best recommendation, because we're now gonna have to fix it in 2 places or 3 places, where before we didn't have to, okay? Now you notice that it says, in these, it's saying undefined. That context is undefined. That's just because we didn't give it an empty object, right? So as soon as we give it an empty object, now it's telling us, first of all, we have another test passing now, because now add to do is like, yeah, I don't care. I just need a context to be there, right? I don't care if it's empty or not. Okay, now what we're getting is that length is undefined, right? Because, or length of undefined, because it doesn't know what to-dos are. So now both of these are throwing the same error where we're trying to call dot something on undefined. Doesn't work with sort, doesn't work with length. So our solution of just saying to-dos as an empty array was a good solution. But if we want to go, if we wanted to keep this file pretty empty and not have to add a bunch of defaults in there, what we could do is actually handle it on a per component basis. So for instance, right here, I'm saying this.context.todos. What I want to do is I want to change that to todos.length, okay? And then what I'm going to do is create a variable up here inside the render, but before the return. I'm going to say const todos equals this.context, right? So I'm just going to pull that out of context. Now that's still going to work in the browser, it's still going to render fine, but that doesn't fix my test. And the way that we fix the test is we say, well, it has a default of an empty array. Okay, so that fixed header, and we could do the same thing in to-do list, right? So we'll go ahead and put that in here, and instead of this.context, toggle complete is fine there, but we'll say to-dos here, right? And so that's another way that you could fix the test, is you could, and if you think about it, this is not just a fix for the test, but a fix for anyone who's running the component in isolation. We're basically setting up the default and letting them know that, hey, this is going to be an array. And so if it's not there, let me go ahead and set it to an empty array. And that still keeps that context file pretty clean. Yes, we were only adding one default empty array, but if you want to set it and forget it, this is all you need for a context file. And the entire app works and is fully tested, smoke tested, without having to do really complex context files that are their own provider, that are their own component. That is insane. Just derive from app and you're good to go. So we do have one little console error down here. I'm going to guess what it is. I'm not even going to look at it. I'm going to guess that it doesn't like that we didn't put a key on this item that we mapped over, right? So let's go ahead and give that a key of todo.id. Nope. I thought for sure that's what it was. Can't perform a React state update on an unmounted component. This is a app.test.js. Component will unmount. Okay, I am guessing this has something to do with the component did mount. Okay, well, no stress about that. We can come back to that later. Oh man, I thought for sure it was the key inside of the map. All right, so that is, I think, this like impromptu workshop for context. I'll go ahead and save this recording and put it in the support guide.